Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to the latest Wednesday episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits, where, as always, you know what I like to do? I like to fling open the doors of your local comic book shop and bring you interviews with your favorite comic book creators of yesterday and today. And today is no different. I'm bringing you an interview with a guy who's just like you and I. He's a fan of comics, but he's taken that fandom one step further. He owns a comic book shop, and look, it doesn't get any better than this. He is a president and editor in chief of what, you might ask? Well, of Archie Comics. And by the way, I come to find out is in my backyard pretty much. So we're talking to none other than Mike Pellerito. Mike, like I said, is just like you and I. He's a comic book fan. And I come to find out through this interview that he knows all the same people I do, frequented all the same shops that I did growing up in our neck of the woods here. And, you know, he like I said, he took that fandom and became the editor in chief of one of the most famous comic book publishers worldwide. So we get into that, his rise to his career, and everything in between. So without further ado, this is my interview with Mike Pellerito. To be talking to none other than Mike Pellerito. How are you, sir?
You're the best. That's a great intro. Thank you, man.
Well, it's my pleasure. I know, I think we have been in the same comic book, fan circle for a very long time. We all know the same people,
Yes.
friends, fans, comic book store owners. And when we started this, we knew we wanted to talk to you as well. So I'm going to start the same way we do with everyone, and that is ask how you first discovered comics.
All right. So I have a very traditional comic book origin story, and I didn't realize it. It also leads to an Archie origin story.
All right.
All right. So when I was a kid, I could walk to the corner, and there was a candy store. Candy store was across the street from my school. The candy store had a spinner rack filled with comics. That's how I got into comics. And if my parents went away or did something, I'd get a comic. So if they had like a nice weekend away and I got stuck with grandma and grandpa, I got a comic as a treat. My grandfather, who would usually walk me to the candy store, lived with us and was an illustrator. So he did advertising, art direction, book covers. I have a bunch of his original artwork that I have framed that we're hanging up. He did all sorts of beautiful stuff, very Norman Rockwell kind of style. And he could draw, so I could draw. So I would always get really into the comic books. And I met a friend in high school, and he's like, they have comic book stores. And I was like, wait, whoa, wow, that's like, and I'm like, I have a big collection. He's like, what do you got? I was like, I have like 30 comics. He's like, oh, I've got like 20 long boxes. I'm like, what the hell is a long box? So he takes me to a comic book store, and these are probably all the comic book stores you and I grew up with, and addicted, completely into it. That was my favorite thing. And right around that high school time period, my dad takes me to the barber, and the guy catches me drawing. He goes, oh, do you like comic books? I'm like, oh, of course, I love comics. And he goes, oh, do you like Archie? Oh, yeah, I love Archie. You want to meet one of the artists who draw Archie? Sure. And he gets on the phone and he goes, hey, Danny, I got a kid here that likes comic books. He likes Archie. Can he come over? Okay, yeah, sure. So the guy talks to my dad, whatever. We go to his house. It's Dan DeCarlo. Like
Wow.
the most legendary like Archie artist ever. So I go to his house, and he lives, like, I drive by his house once in a while, and he has that white Archie tree, like that, that's in every panel of Archie. And it's like, pull up to the guy's house, and he was so nice to me. And his wife answers the door, his wife, Josie. So she lets me in, and she brings me to his man cave, which is his studio. He's got all this artwork up there. And I was drawing in notebooks like the little kid does. I didn't know. And he shows me these giant things. I thought they were posters. That was original comic book art. And he had a pinup of Betty and Veronica in a bikini. And I was like, wow, look at this. And then he shows me how he draws, and he gave me a couple of books, and he stayed friendly with me my whole life. Oh, you're the kid from the barber shop. And he was good to me forever until he passed away. And it's this weird little origin story of finding something you like and then meeting someone. And then I didn't think I'd be at Archie. I didn't think I'd be Archie for like 24 years. So it all kind of bizarrely worked out.
That's pretty amazing.
It's and the week to show you how cool DeCarlo was. The week I was hired was the week he got fired, where all the ugly stuff with Archie went down. There was lawsuits and all this stuff. So the artist back then, it was very old school. For the first, I don't know how many years I was there, the artist would come in like every Tuesday and Friday. So you joke around, you get to everyone lived in New York, everyone lived nearby, and a lot of them go back forever. So like you could have a conversation about timely comics before it was Marvel. Mm-hmm. Those guys worked in the bullpen in the newsstand. Like it was just insane. But that Saturday was one of those New York shows, you know, the Penn Plaza, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so that Saturday I go, hey, Dan, I wanted to surprise you. I got a new job. I'm working in comics. He goes, oh my God, kid, that's great. And I was like, yeah, I was waiting for you all day at Archie, but what happened? And he goes, well, whatever. It is what it is. And I was like, well, I don't want to work anymore. I don't like this. And he's like, no. And he got real serious. And he goes, and he listed all the people that worked. He goes, these people are great. Deal with them as much as you can. Learn as much as you can. The minute they treat you like trash, get out. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like the week it all happened. So he came over, Joe's, and I stayed, you know, I should have talked to them more, but I'm too nervous. But it was pretty cool as a kid. Like that was my whole early experience.
So you were pretty much destined to work at Archie just like from an early age.
I don't know how, but like it doesn't.
It was written somewhere.
But it like the week you get there, you're like, hey, I knew DeCarlo because of the barber, and they're like, yes, so. And it's like, oh, yeah. I thought that would hit a little better. And then, but you know, I was there for a few years, and they gave me more stuff to do. I get bored easy, so they kept, oh, do this, do that, and it's been a good fit for me.
So, at what point in your life did you realize you wanted to make comics your career? Was it at that point when you were a young boy?
When I was a kid, I loved comic books. I didn't know, and school was not my strong suit by far. But I loved drawing. I loved all the cartoons and the toy. Like that was just everything for me. You know, you'd get a comic and read it 1,000 times until the staples pop out. You know, like that was like perfect for me. And then I started realizing there's a career and people put these things together. So, and I really wanted to be an artist. And I went to the Kubert School. And it was a great experience. 3 years. I had Joe Kubert as one of my teachers. That was like unreal. And like the whole staff there, every teacher was like, you could put on a list of like, oh, these are the best teachers I had in my life. They usually came from that school. But by the time I got out, I was like, I do not want to draw comics. This is not for me. I don't have what it takes in terms of working from home and being alone. I need to socialize. I like a stability of every 2 weeks you get a check. You know, for freelancers, it's a very different life. Right. So I'm aware of that as much as I can be, you know, with how we handle stuff. But I just knew, no, this isn't it. So I thought maybe graphic design or something. One of the teachers I stayed friendly with, I was like, I think I'm going to get a staff job. I was doing freelance graphic design. I liked it. I was working part-time in a comic book store. Remember Dragon's Den in Cross County?
Do I ever?
So all through,
how much money I spent in that place?
Oh my God. All through Kubert School, I worked there. So like if you worked, you were insane. I worked full-time, commuted an hour each way, and then you'd get like 10 hours of homework. Like it was such boot camp. So I was working part-time there because I loved it and I got my discount on comics. And then I was doing graphic design. And someone goes, oh, you know, there's a teacher I stayed in touch with. And he goes, you know, there's a staff position. And I wanted to learn more computers. Like I didn't feel super great with my skill set. And he goes, oh, you know, they'll have you do computers. You do some coloring. You do some production stuff. I said, okay, cool. Perfect. And I went in, I interviewed. Victor Gorelick was the editor-in-chief. And I got very friendly with him as the years went on. But in the beginning, he was like the very gruff, like New York City editor. Like he just didn't like give you any like slack. And I was just like, wow, this guy's really tough. I don't think I'm gonna last here. But it worked out. And every time I thought I'd quit, it gave me something new to do.
That's pretty amazing.
Right? Like, what are we gonna complain about?
So just an aside, Where at what point in the Dragon's Den history did you work there? Was it during the cross county years or when they were
Cross
like way
county
up?
years.
Okay. So yeah, I think I remember you there.
I was so I I think I'm an okay person now, but at various points in my life, I was too much of a wise ass for my own good. And the staff at Dragon's Den was awesome, and it was so
Mm.
much fun working there. And the people I worked with were some of them were hysterical, like you would just cry laughing. And I realized that because I own Oh Yeah Comics
Oh
with
yeah.
Mark and Franco and Art and all these guys. So like I get the idea of a community, like a comic shop is a community. And I was one of the few people that rotated counters at Dragon's Den. So you had the video game counter, there was a sports card and collectible comics. The back
Mhm.
was Magic and like Warhammer, all these different things. There was some anime, but like I kind of bounced between. I was usually at the Magic counter. I knew nothing about Magic, and like everything, I just kind of would steal from what other people were saying. I'd be like, "Oh yeah, Black Lotus, man, that's the hot card you got." Like, and but the kids who were in the back, I would joke around with them, and some of them were hysterical, and some of them would be like, they'd come up to a bar almost like, "Oh, I had a hard time at school, man. The girl I liked, she likes my best friend." And you're like, so I would give advice that was as dumb as it could possibly be because I'm like 20 something. I didn't know anything. And my memory is always, if it's a bad thing, I have a sharp memory. If it's fun, I kind of like forget about it. And names I've always been horrible with. So a lot of them, like I would be like, "Oh, you're this or you're that." Like I gave them nicknames, and that I would Big Brother kind of like
Yeah.
torture them. Um, and we're doing New York Comic Con one year, and this kid walks up to me. He was probably 25 or 30, and he goes, "Do you remember me?" I was like, "You look really familiar." And he goes, "You know, I used to shop at the Dragon's Den." And I was like, "Oh, I'd like to apologize for whatever stupid thing I've ever done, because I'm sure, I meant it with the best, but I know I was an idiot." He's, "No, no, no, I had a great time. You were really good to me." And I go, "Well, your face is familiar." He goes, "You used to call me Kool-Aid Lip." And I was like, "I remember you." And immediately I saw that like 12-year-old kid. And he always had like red on
Of the
his lip from Kool-Aid. And he's like, "Oh, I'm working in the industry now. I'm doing accounting. I work at this publishing house." And I was like, "Oh my God." And so like different guys I've met that are now, they're adults. They're like 30 years old or whatever. And you're like, holy cow. So hopefully I didn't impact the world too negatively.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, you're a fan who's gotten to do, what we love. You made it your career out of what we love to do and collect. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. And so you decide to make a career out of comics. And how did you get your foot in the door? Well, you described how you did that, but how did you make Archie your career and just make that just what you do? Because look, people nowadays when they get a job, they're there 3 5 years maybe, and they move on to something else. Longevity in a company is it's few and far between.
Yeah, but like, so the guy I always talk about, Victor Gorelick,
Yep.
he was at Archie like 60 years. Like, so like I'm nothing. Like it didn't, like my time in the in Archie land wasn't a speck to him. So like you go, "Oh, I've been here 24 years," and he's like, "So." He's like, "I have shirts older than you. Like, give me a break, kid." So um the only thing that it worked for me is I get bored quickly. So I don't think I've had the same job at Archie for more than like 3 years. Like I might have had a title for a long time. I might have, been involved with something for a long time, but my day-to-day involvement always seems to change every few years. So I never get bored. Um, and then, like, God, I don't know how many years ago, 10, 12 years ago, we got a new CEO, and it's this guy I never heard of. And John Goldwater comes in, and I'm like, what is going on? And we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And now we're going to, I'm like, all right, cool, man, whatever. We'll see. And then like 15 years later, it's like, holy crap, how did we do all this? This is amazing. So that at that point, I probably would have been thinking to go, but he came in and I was just like, all right, he's got the right energy, he's got a vision. Like I can actually do stuff here and feel like I'm useful. So that was probably have kept me longer than I think I probably would have stayed otherwise.
What is it about Archie that keeps it going for so long? Because, other than say like, the original superheroes, Batman, Superman, um, this is, if not one of, the longest running comic. And, it's been through some changes, but at the core, it's, correct me if I'm wrong, it is pretty much the same basic comic. Um, there are other iterations out there, but Archie is Archie. What makes it so endearing to fans? And just, I mean, just the longevity alone is just astounding.
There, all right. So I if I didn't work at Archie, I would have done what most people do. You read it a few years, then you move to, a lot of kids go manga, they go superheroes, you find your way, and then you might pick it up as a nostalgia reader. You hand it off to your kids, or you just purely your own, go back to your own childhood and read it. Um, so I developed an incredible appreciation for I like superheroes, and with Archie, I started seeing all these different ways to tell a story. Like you take an Archie 5-page story, probably have about 23 panels to tell a full story. You get a big splash panel and then two little panels on the first page, and then you have 4, 5, or 6 the rest. Like you don't have a lot of room.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be really smart, really efficient, really quick visually, and you can't have the characters speak too much. You want it brief, you want it moving. You don't want to have a real thick word balloon while there's something funny happening, because all of a sudden the energy of the story slows down.
Right.
So, I mean, there's some brilliant Archie stories where there's no words at all. It's just, one story I loved was, I think, is Archie and Veronica. The entire story is Veronica saying Archie and Archie saying Veronica. Like that's it. And it's so like you start seeing this stuff, and then a lot of people think, oh, Archie's drawn by one person, right? And it's like, no, like you have Bob Montana, and then there was this whole like you had all these George Freeze and all these different people who drew very Montana-esque. And I started reading a lot of the old We did deals where we got the old the newspaper strips licensed out through IDW and different things. And that was my first like deep dive. And I'm like, this is hysterical. Like laugh out loud funny stuff that we grew up on in 80s and 90s comedy movies, when comedy movies were exploded. I'm like, this stuff happened 50 years prior in these comic strips. And then you have DeCarlo, and everyone goes, oh, DeCarlo's the greatest. He draws the prettiest girls, and he has all. And then you go, I don't know, man. Did you look at Harry Lucy? His characters are practically animated. They move so much on the page. And then you have a guy like Sam Schwartz, who everyone would think of as Jughead. And this is like prime time 60s stuff. And they all were like post World War II, and they went forever. But like this 60s stuff, the amount of work they did, and so much was absolutely perfect. Like just brilliant. How did you figure that out? And you start seeing, wow, there's a lot of variance in how they tell the story, visually how they tell the story. And it's kind of like ice cream. So Archie's, your basic ice cream. Everyone likes ice cream, but each person brings a different flavor to it. So, if you like pistachio or vanilla or strawberry, there's different people. And the more you can dig into it, the more you find. And then you have the generational changes that happen. So you had like Dan Perrin and Bill Collier and Bill Galvin and all these different guys popping up, and Holly Golightly, and now we have Stephen Butler and his daughter Lil. Like all these different people are popping into it, and they bring something different, and they keep going, hey, did you ever read this old stuff? From the 40s and 60s? Like they're geniuses. And you're like, yeah, like you watch people. So like the deeper dive you go into it, the more you develop an appreciation. And then this year's been a very weird year in that I've been getting hit with all these personal Archie stories. And so like 2026 is the 85th anniversary. So like we've been talking about what do we do to really do something neat for the 85th? How many characters are going strong at 85 years? How many people are still relevant? Never mind all the variations, there's still that all ages classic Archie that's still
Mhm.
like right there. So in I think it was March, there's this comic book shop organization, Comics Pro. I don't know how much you know about it. So like,
I don't know about that.
oh god, Comics Pro is brilliant. So they meet once a year. It's a retailer run organization, and you have a bunch of comic book stores, publishers, distributors. They all meet, and like as a publisher, I could go and be like, "Hey, this is what's coming up," and I'm talking directly to retailers. And some retailers would be like, "That's great. I want to buy more of that. No, that's stupid. Could you do it this way?" Like it's just this great workshop opportunity. Um, I hadn't gone for Archie because I'd been out of the distribution side for a while. So Mark at All Yeah was going to join Comics Pro, and he said, "You love it so much, and you basically twisted my arm. If I go, you have to come with us." I was like, "That's weird, dude. Like I'm on the publisher side. I can't like sit at the Marvel or DC, like pitch. I know those guys. They'll know who I am." It's like, no, just come, hang out. You know enough people that you won't even get out of the lobby. And it was great. So I walk in. There's like an auction night. It's really fun. So all the publishers are joking around. I'm sitting at the table, and there's friends from Diamond and Penguin Random House and Lunar, and then people from different publishers. Like it's just a great vibe. So it's like sort of an after party con thing. And from the minute I walked in, someone had something to say about Archie. Um, and it in some cases got extraordinarily touching. Hey, I never told you this, but, and it kept getting these buts. And some of the stories were like, I was like almost crying. Wow, this is unbelievable. One person at one point told me little kids can recognize even a smiley face and connect to that. And her father was going through a form of Alzheimer's. She said, I wonder if it's reverse. So she brought him an Archie comic. He goes, oh, I remember this guy. And started reading the comics to him. It wasn't always there, but he connected on the stories. And you're like, holy cow, like that's amazing. Um, and then I had other stuff where I walk in the door and guy's pretty important in the industry, comes up to me and he jams his finger in my chest. I know him well, so it's playful. And he's like, where do you get off charging $9.99 for a digest? And I was like, what? I was like, you should be kissing my. And he's like, what? I said, it's 192 pages, 180 plus of content. I go, and I bet you didn't see it in a comic book store. I bet you saw it on a wire rack at a store where civilians shop. Yeah, well, yeah. Well, that means I'm promoting comic books to everywhere outside of comic books, which drives them to comic book stores, which is where we want them. Well, yeah, it's a good point. I was like, so I'm offering them value, and I'm making sure I'm seeing the praises of comic books everywhere. I was like, so Archie's kind of kicking ass here. He's like, oh yeah, it's a good point. And I was like, you didn't find comic books when you were a kid at a comic book store? Like, no, I found them in like a wire rack or a spinner rack. Like, yeah. So I'm still making sure that we're there, and Archie does that. Then we did a sales conference for the book market, and a couple people, oh, I want to meet the Archie guy. And again, I hadn't been to one of these sales conferences in forever. And a woman comes up to me and she's like, I want to thank you for my childhood. And I was like, whoa, we're like the same age. I had nothing to do with it. Like it was somebody else. Like she was like, no, but you're the guy. And they would I would switch comic books with my neighbor and different things. And then there was a retailer I'm friendly with. And he said and he starts texting me. He goes, I want to tell you the story. And he starts texting me throughout the course of the day, to the point where I had to like mute the notifications because it was a cliffhanger. Like I needed to know what happened, but I couldn't deal with it. So at the end of the day, it's all finished, and I start reading through. This person who shopped at the store had a traumatic brain injury, and she could no longer read. And she was this voracious reader, everything, Archie, superheroes, books, just tons of stuff. And this guy I know, he has the greatest Archie collection ever. Like he's got everything. So like I've gone to his house, I've hung out with him as well. Like it's just amazing. So when there's stuff I don't know, he's someone I text. So he starts telling me, he goes, well, I fell in love with Archie with this very specific issue. And he was putting it off well. I didn't know how to start. And he goes, but I'm going to read her this specific issue so she can, and he would record it and send it to her so she could read comics again. And as he's telling me this throughout the day, like I started tearing up. I'm like, I gotta read the whole thing at once. And it's like he read some comic book that he fell in love with in the 1970s as a kid and gave it as a gift to a woman who wanted to read it. And now he reads her Archies all day. And I'm like, holy cow, this is insane. And it's so there's a magic on these characters that I never really understood. But then when you start getting in there and working at the company and meeting people, even like the tough guys are like, I only like superheroes. I won't read that. And it's like, my grandma had a box of Archies, and she used to read them to me. And oh God, I missed her so. And you're like, all right, I got you, man. I got you. And it's amazing. So like, I don't know what the secret sauce is. I just know it's there.
And I'm glad you said that, because I was going to ask, how Archie is able to compete with all the other content that's out there, because, you know, comics are very sensational, superheroes, horror, noir, all kinds of stuff. And Archie is pretty wholesome. And wholesome doesn't always, you know, it doesn't really grab people's attention all the time. Clearly it does, but like how is Archie able to compete with all the other, with the big two and all the other crap that's out there?
So with the classic Archie stuff, there's so many variations on it. You can do anything. And it's almost and they've been doing that from the beginning. Like we have this Archie one where he's a caveman. And then I was going through like reprints of 40s comic books. I'm like, we did that with like in the first few years. And then I started going, oh, well, we did the superhero stuff in the 60s, but some of that was earlier. And and then it evolved obviously to the horror stuff with Afterlife and Sabrina, and now like the Cursed Library and all these different things. And part of the magic is if you the characters are pretty much the same regardless of where you put them. How they react changes based on what they are. So in a thing like Afterlife or Blossom 666 or Jughead the Hunger, instead of being random teenagers you don't know, like in Friday the 13th, these are the kids you grew up with. You've got a certain level of love. And even if you weren't like a heavy duty Archie reader, you know who everybody is pretty quick, even if it's your first time reading it. You get who Jughead is and Betty and Veronica. Like all the dynamics are they're right there.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you take that and start changing it into different locations, like horror or with the reboot stuff or different things, they keep finding ways to resonate. And then part of the secret sauce that I have figured out how it's made is if you look at the world as like a 10-year-old kid, and if you remember, no matter how weird your idea as a kid was, it seemed plausible. Like, oh, I bet I could be an astronaut. Like it just, like that Calvin and Hobbes stuff would kind of play off of that, where you're like,
right,
oh man, this giant like crushed mark on the floor must have been dinosaurs last night. Like, and you have that imagination as a kid. When you start having the characters apply it to their stories, they're just as imaginative as you are as a kid. So, Archie makes sense. The old jalopy makes sense. The, finding, aliens show up in Little Archie. All these like different things that pop up over the years. It makes sense if you look at it with sort of an innocent imagination, and then that's how we've created these other things like Riverdale, and it sort of just spirals out of there, and it starts with a little bit of childlike imagination.
Now, do you guys have any involvement with those other kind of Archie properties like Riverdale and things like that?
Like in the beginning of Riverdale, I mean, the CEO of the company, John, has a ton. There's a few people that got heavily involved. The first year or two, they would send questions to me and Victor, who was still alive at the time, but like, hey, what's the mall in Riverdale called? They'd be like, it's Mall Mart. And they're like, what? I'm like it's always something stupid, and you're like, yeah, that's what it is. And they're like, oh, okay. And they would who is this? What's this person's real name? Oh, it's Moose Marmaduke. They're like, okay, and so like you start explaining stuff, and And then by the third season, they kind of were fine. They figured it all out. And then like with the Katie Keene show, they filmed in New York City. So I went to watch some of the filming a couple of times. And, early on, they kind of do a deep dive. They get heavy into the books. They ask a bunch of questions. And then as things go on, it becomes its own sort of beast. They're good on their own.
It's pretty interesting. So obviously being a comic book fan for years, I was certainly aware, and I've read Archie comics over the years. I also watched a fair amount of television growing up. And I remember, I want to say in the early 90s, maybe late 80s, there was a TV show, a
Yes.
made for TV movie of, it was Archie. I don't remember the exact title of it, but it was as if Archie and Jughead and Betty and Veronica grew up. And
to Riverdale and back again.
Okay, there we go.
So there's this slew of stuff. To Riverdale and back again was before I started.
Okay.
I think that might have been like late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
And I remember watching it. And it's become kind of a cult classic, which is weird to me, but I just remember like, I don't want to see adult Archies. Like I want to see the Archies, man. I want to see what's going on. And like Jughead rapped, like the whole thing was bonkers. And Lauren Holly, the actress, she was in Dumb and Dumber.
Dumb and Dumber.
She was Betty.
Yes.
And so like the whole thing was. But I remember when I started at Archie, it was like the prior administration, and it went up, and it was a Monday night movie. It went up against Monday Night Football and the television broadcast premiere of The Untouchables. And they're like, any other night we would have been, and it was okay. It did all right. But they at that time, then they had another show called The New Archies, which was a Saturday afternoon cartoon, Saturday morning cartoon. And then the late 90s, I think it was, Archie's Weird Mysteries, very Scooby-Doo-esque kind of stuff. And then there was a bunch of Sabrina animated stuff, all like popping at the same time. And so like there's always these like wild like moments in Archie history where all these things happen. Like in the 60s, 1969, the number one song, 1969. I remember doing research for like our 75th anniversary or whatever. I've been there since 65th anniversary, something crazy. And I remember doing research, and I was like 1969, Beatles, Woodstock, Jimi Hendrix, like Motown, like number one album.
Well, the Archies.
Sugar. And then September, all the Twitter and all these different things put the anniversaries of all the cartoon shows. So I'm like, oh yeah, Transformers, I remember that, this and that. And then Archie came up, and then Archie was the number one cartoon show of 1969 or something. I'm like, wait, what? Like there was like so much stuff, and so like it's this weird power of Archie. And then I think we outsold every comic book in that year too. So like we outsold Batman and Superman, and it's like so like these characters just keep exploding. And then we had Riverdale, and then I don't know if you got to watch the Archies. We did the
no.
All right. So this is like, again, Archie does all these. We do these bonker things, man. So the boss got this movie set up. It's really good. I really enjoy it. It's like Grease. It's like just a feel good musical.
Okay.
Archie does really well throughout the world. One of the places we have historically done great and really connected is India. So when Netflix goes into a territory, the first thing they do is look for local comedians and start running specials. And that's how they kind of endear themselves, get local comedians, kind of blow these guys up. And then they look for local graphic novels that they can turn into an animation or a movie or something, and just really like get that portion of the audience excited. They went, oh, the Archies is like the biggest thing in India. We're going to do that. So we had the biggest budget for a Netflix India movie ever.
Really?
And it's this Bollywood, and it's done 1960 style. They change a lot, so it makes sense that it's localized and it feels a very organic story from India, and it's got all the characters. And it's it's there's music, there's singing. I've listened to the soundtrack a bunch. It's just like this happy, upbeat, like so. And so first time we got to see the New York premiere, it was subtitled, and then I was like, oh, I wonder if they have like an English dub, so I can just kind of listen to it while I'm working. And I do, and it's like, so for a while, like that was my musical playlist, and it's like this great, like, wow, this is what I want every Archie movie to be. This is like the perfect classic, all like Archie movie you expect.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to ask how you got into being an owner of a comic book store. Um,
Bizarrely.
yeah, I mean, you worked at one. Clearly, you're a fan of comics, and not only do you work in the industry, you own a comic book store too.
So forever I went to Steve Oto's store, Alternate Realities. That was my store.
Yeah,
And
I
Steve,
remember you from there too,
yes,
man.
that's yeah, like, oh, he would, like, their faces, and you see, and
Yeah.
all those guys get together for like a book club, by
Yeah.
the way. And
Yes.
they're like, oh, we're going to do a book club on such and such a date. I was like, wow, for some reason my schedule is clear. I can't wait to hang out with you guys and talk comic books. And I realized if it was the weekend of Baltimore Comic Con, I'm like, that's why it's clear. I'm not going to be around. But
I think Allie actually invited me to one of those ones.
I would love to go. I've never done like a book club ever on anything, and I would love to see like a comic book club.
Yeah,
just shut up, and because everybody's funny too, so I think it would be neat. But so Steve was closing the store, and that was like my spot. I would go there, and sometimes I lived really close at that point, so I would just kill time. I'd go by, hang out, and I know Steve has this legendary temper, but I thought I was getting put on because I never experienced that with him until the very last day. He closed the store, and he blew up at some guy buying a manga for his kid or something. And I'm like, I thought it was a legend. I didn't think you really were mean. You've always been so nice to me. And Steve was great. So when these guys were talking about opening a store in New York in Westchester, it's like, oh, I don't want to do that because I'm really loyal to Steve, but anything I could do to help you guys, I would. And then Steve's like, I've had enough. He's been talking about retiring for I don't know how many years. And he retired. And I was like, hey, I want to do this, you know. And so he kind of gave me the ups and downs of what it'll be. And I was like, well, I wouldn't do it if you were still in business. He's like, oh, thanks. I appreciate that. But, you got to do what you want to do. And he wound up being super gracious because he gave us Slack boards and display. Like, he was just, that's the Steve I know is like this generous, wonderful guy.
mm-hmm.
And and he's been really good to Mark, who owns a store and runs a store. And so that's been 9 years. And it's owned by Mark and Art and Franco, who've now become some of my best friends, and then a few other people that are in the industry. And between us, like the group, we've had these amazing signings at the store. But just between all of us, we kind of know everybody. So we've had like Neil Adams and Simonsons and Chris Claremont, and just like names were like, how is this in like a regular store? And then the people that I work with at Archie, like Dan's been there, Dan Parent, and we had Frank Thierry, and I don't know, there's probably a million names I'm forgetting, but we have these great signings. Jerry Ordway's been there. They did a big signing for Action 1000, and it's like,
yeah, I was there for that one.
It's like like the signings are unbelievable.
Back there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, that I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, I remember when that shop opened, it was like you said, after Alternate Realities closed, and I was heartbroken when that shop closed, because that was pretty much where I went to buy physical comics. And then once it closed, I had discovered digital because, I had nowhere else to go.
Right.
And then AYA opened up, and I happened to be working close to it at the time, and that ended up being my go-to place. And it was unlike a lot of comic book shops. I mean, and this is not to knock any of the others before it, Dragon's Den or Alternate Realities, but those other places became they were old.
They
you
were old
know,
school comic book stores. They
old
were
school
very,
comic book
they're very,
shops.
the places I love. That's where that's where I got my comic book addiction from. But
Right. But at this point, I'm at the time I was on the cusp of being a father,
right,
and later on, having two kids, and all yeah opens up, and this is a place where I'm going to, I'm happy to bring my own kids to, because it's just bright and cheerful, and you walk in and Mark is there to greet everybody like with a smile, and it's so pleasant and clean.
yeah.
And I was like, this place is great, and I think they really hit it out of the park. I mean, you guys, just like you said, all these great signings. There's so much, there's so many, like, just collections always coming in, comics. If you look through, you're going to find gems no matter what.
Here, all right. Someone I went to grade school with had moved away, and then they were cleaning out their parents' house, and I hadn't talked to them probably since eighth grade. Like maybe on Facebook, wherever we found each other. I think there was like a grade school reunion or something. She's like, "Hey, I have a few boxes of Archie comics that were mine when I was a kid and my mom's. Does your store buy them?" And I was like, "I'll ask them. Some Archie stuff is worth a ton. Some of it's worth, a quarter or a dollar. So like, you're not going to retire on it. I'm sure it's not like Action Comics 1 or something, yeah, or Pep 22 or what are these like." And so Mark goes, "I never had this many Archie back issues before." So he bought all these comics, her old collection. And then I was like, "Oh, how are they doing?" You never know. Like you don't want to be disappointed. He's like, "Oh my God, I'm blowing out. I did this, this, this." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And like I was able, through a random old connection, make her a little money and made us a little money.
That's pretty amazing.
It's wild. Yeah. So, but you know, Mark is, I think, a really smart retailer. His ability to be upbeat is unbelievable. And any success that store has, I'm just along for the ride. So I feel the same way with Archie. I just try to help out wherever I can, just along for the ride.
As a, certainly a patron of the store, th- everyone that goes there has nothing but good things to say.
Yeah, isn't that cool? Like it just, you have different people that pop in, the pros that are nearby. Dan Greenfield from 13th Dimension, and it's crazy. It's like
And everyone knows each other. I've noticed, like,
yes,
I know, people from here, and I know people from this group, and they know each other from other stuff. And I worked with that guy and this guy, but everyone knows. So it's a great place. And, I think, it's, certainly it's a gem for the community.
at like Terrificon, there had to be a dozen plus people. We'd be like, "Hey, Mike, what's up?" And I'm like, "Oh, hey," and you really, it's like that's your backyard, one of your backyard shows. Like, oh, okay, perfect. It's I don't know, man. They have another place that has the secret sauce. They figured it out how to treat people well.
And the artists there too had nothing but good things to say about Aya as well.
Yeah, I mean the signing. I'm always amazed the people that are just so friendly to come out. I'm forgetting people, but yeah, it's pretty cool. It's not a bad way to spend the day.
That's pretty fun. I like it, and so does my son.
Nice.
So
what's his addiction? What's he reading?
So he is into Pokemon.
Perfect.
He's into what's the other, Dogman.
Yes.
And he likes Miles Morales Spider-Man.
Yes. That is the generational superhero character for kids, and Dogman is like, those are touchstones that when these kids are 30, like that's going to be their Barney and all these other things.
Yeah, I mean, every time we go, he wants the new issue, new volume of Dogman, whatever that may be. And then there's the other one, Cat.
Yes.
Boy, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's
Wimpy Kid and all these like different.
Yes, yeah, all of that. I mean, I tried to get him into other stuff. Like he read through the Who's Who of DC when I got it, and was just, I mean, he was just so into flipping through this character and that character, and why is he not around? I'm like, well, his name's Captain Nazi. You don't want him around. So like, so he likes it, he appreciates it. My daughter a little bit less just because she has other interests, but she respects it enough because she knows that's what daddy is
Yeah,
into and all that. So, you know, even my oldest, she
yeah.
loved Riverdale. I
And
mean, just crazy for it. Even my wife got into it for a bit.
oh, did you?
So,
Can I give you a funny Riverdale story?
absolutely.
All right. So the the year before, not the year before, but like the San Diego before Riverdale aired live. So we had a really big booth, and I had Mark working with Archie, so he was running the booth, and we didn't know what would happen. It was very sort of like maybe it will, maybe it won't. But we got the Riverdale cast to come to the Archie booth.
Wow.
So this is before they explode. Again, this is like when you see something like, oh, this is going to be big. So we found out like really, I forget if it was really, really late or like first thing in the morning. So Mark like basically snuck his way into the convention center, reconfigured the entire booth on his own, and we set up for the setting. We had to deal with Warner Brothers security, we had to deal with con security, had to plan this whole thing out. Everything like had to go off without hitch, and it did. And we had basically the whole cast, and Luke Perry was there, and he was the name sort of guy. Then you had KJ Appa and Cole, who was then exploding off of his like with Nickelodeon or Disney success.
Oh yeah.
And then you had all the girls going down to I'm blanking on her name, who played Josie, and she shows up with Josie ears. And like I was like, wow, like just how they're interacting with each other, how they're interacting with the fairy, like this is unbelievable. And people were coming up and getting things signed, and like this show isn't on the air, and like we're managing the line like nonstop. Security's like, you got to move this over, and just wrapping around and wrapping around, and we were going to the people next to us like, hey, I'm really sorry. We'd get them a signed poster. Like we didn't want to burn anybody.
Yeah.
And the girl who was doing, I forget what her company was, but she had like kind of a jughead hat that she had made on her own, completely unaware she was going to be next to the Archie booth. So we got Cole to come over and take a picture with the hat, and she was like, oh my god, like went nuts. Like we just had like this great good vibe around the whole booth. And at one point, Luke Perry gets, and they don't know who I am. I'm just a big dude. They probably thought I was security. And Luke Perry gets up and kind of stretches, and the handlers are there, and they're like, you're really amazing at this. And he was so good to every fan. Do you like that? It's okay. And I'm like, dude, you have made every person you have talked to smile for the rest of the week. He's like, oh, thanks, man. And he was everyone, and you could see like he was kind of mentoring everybody, and it was so cool. After that, we had a regular signing, and this dude comes over in a Batman mask. Just the bottom, the front part of the mask, bottom's open, the back of his head's open, and he walks over to get a signed comic. And he looks at me, and I look at him, and I gesture he should turn his name tag around because it said Cole Sprouse. And he was like, "Oh my god!" So he takes it, and he like tucks it in, and he's signing and he's talking. He's being really cool. And then as he's there, his mask bink breaks, the strap pops, and you could see a look of like, "Oh, geez, what's going to happen?" We have this person helping us work the booth, Candace, and you might know her from Con. She helps like Tom King and different guys. Like her day job though is a brain surgeon. Unbelievable person. Like she's so cool. And so she goes, "Give me the mask," and she takes out a paper clip and like puts it together and puts it on his mask and put the mask on. It's like sturdier than ever. It's amazing. Thank you. She goes, "Well, it's not brain surgery." And we burst out laughing because it's a great joke. And he's staring like, "What do you?" And we have to explain. He's like, "Wait, what?" And we're like, so it was like this whole like wild moment. But he went around the con afterwards wearing the Batman mask, like checking out all the cool stuff he saw. I was like, I feel like good. I think the show's going to be a success.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean they were all very, very cool. They were super gracious to all the fans. I was really impressed.
So that's so cool.
Yeah.
So before we go, what do you have, and or what does Archie have coming up that we can look forward to?
Oh God, there's all this stuff. I have all these things on my wall. Well, we've got digest like crazy. There's like one a week. We're heavily already going into it. Just basically goes summer, Halloween, Christmas. Like all of our lives, it's a blur. We just released the Tom King Dan Parent, The Decision. If you want to read a perfect classic story, Archie story,
Mhm.
that has everyone guest starring, Tom and Dan nailed it. And Tom is like a massive Archie fan. So the guy who writes all these dark and amazing stories,
Yeah.
he and I, when we met, we talked nonstop Archie nerdery, and like we were going toe for toe. I'm like, oh my god, he knows so much. It's like one of the best conversations I've ever had with a pro, like who just totally gets it. What do we got? We got a new villain showing up, and we have a Halloween. Oh, I'm blanking on the order because I think it goes Halloween Sabrina Josie, and we have a new super villain showing up, Mother Striga. She's the original evil witch, and we had another evil witch, Amber Nightstone, show up before, and she sold out. So like all these villains for Sabrina we have spreading out in the books. We've been doing the facsimile books for the first time in forever. Like it's been a trend, but we finally hopped on it, and people are going nuts. We did Betty and Me 16, which is sort of an inappropriate cover. A couple of Betty and Veronica coming out, which is fun. And then the horror stuff is on fire. We just wrapped up Archie Judgment Day, where Archie goes to hell. Not the classic Archie stuff, but amazing. The Cursed Library, which features Madam Satan, who's a villain we brought back a few years ago, who's amazing. And remember Little Jinx from the Digest? She's that little blonde girl that always get in trouble. It was usually the stories I skipped in the Digest, in all honesty.
Fair enough.
And so we have some of the characters age up. So they're in there. We have a Salem one shot coming out.
That's cool.
And it's sick. It's really cool. Like the Jamie Rotante is the editor on. She does a ton of stuff, but she really she's taken over all the horror and modern stuff, and she's really come up with really cool ways to do things that I always call her the other Jamie Lee of horror. So she's been just like killing that stuff really good. I don't know. That's plenty of stuff right there. Anytime you want books, let me know. You have a connection.
And we're back. So, what did you guys think of that? Mike is a really cool guy. Like I said, very cool, down to earth, so kind and generous, kind enough to send my kids a bunch of various Archie comics. And like I said, it was great to finally chat with him. I've seen him so many places over the years, and we've, very lightly chatted over the years and discussed kind of comic-y stuff, but never really got down to it. So it was a great experience. So I'm very happy to have talked to him. Hopefully he can come back again. But until then, what do you say? You guys hit that little like and subscribe. Share this podcast with friends and family. Okay. They'll be happy you did. I can guarantee that. So until next time, we'll see you.